Freya, I've come to pick you up. Andrew picked her up and spun around happily. Freya smiled and nuzzled her head against Andrew, making his heart tremble. So adorable. It was Luca's graduation ceremony. He was finally going to graduate from the academy. Freya was going to surprise her cousin. Make sure you give her her jacket when you reach the hall. It's cold there. Make sure she stays hydrated and drinks plenty of water. If she's hungry, give her the biscuits I stored in the spatial ring. Arke instructed. I got it. It's not the first time I'm bringing her out, Andrew reassured nonchalantly. Trust me a bit, won't you? I do trust you, brother. But you're not really reliable, Arke answered in a matter-of-fact tone. Freya had to agree with her father. Last time we went boating, I almost fell into the river. The boat was already wobbling so much, yet you insist on making the current stronger. Why haven't I heard of this? Arke's eyes narrowed, making Andrew look away. Arke sighed and pecked Freya's forehead. Have fun, listen to your uncle. Brother, you better take care of her with your life, if she gets hurt. I will. Andrew's tone turned serious. With a bitter smile, he continued, we can't afford to lose her for the second time. Arke nodded as he clenched his fist. He got lucky this time. He adjusted his expression and couldn't hold back from grabbing Freya's hand just to feel her warmth. The confused Freya held her father's fingers in her small hand and tilted her head at him. Her heart was still beating. Everything would be fine. Freya, who was focused on playing with Cinder, just now recalled the weird sentence and glanced at her uncle with a puzzled expression. Have I ever left you guys? Oh dear, look at the time. We have to get going. Bye. Andrew laughed awkwardly after realizing what he said and avoided the question. He teleported to the academy with Freya in his arms. As they entered the hall, they were greeted by the headmaster. Andrew was a demon king, so their seat was naturally special. They sat at the VIP room on the second floor that had the best view of the entire hall. They were served with many beverages and snacks. Freya tacitly didn't touch any of the food and sat obediently on the sofa beside Andrew as she hugged Cinder. It wouldn't end up well if she gets poisoned again. She glanced around. As expected of one of the three great academies in the novel, the interior was designed extravagantly. The Academy of the Demon Realm, Blood Abyss. Every demon had to attend this academy, including the children of the demon kings. It teaches the rules of the demon realm, as well as what one would usually learn in school. The demons start attending at the age of 13 and normally graduate at the age of 18. Luca was graduating 1 year ahead, at the age of 17, because he skipped a grade. I doubt Arke would let you attend. You'll probably just take the test, Andrew murmured, making Freya turn to him. The only exception is that the demon passes the test that was twice as hard as the original one at the age of 16, meaning they had to study ahead. If they fail the test, they had to attend the academy starting from the first year, no questions asked. Though the syllabus was harder than her previous world, it won't be a problem for Freya. I understand why he's so protective of you. But I think he should ask for your opinion. Andrew glanced at her with a meaningful look, while cupping his cheek with his hand. I have no interest in school, Freya replied with a smile. There was no hesitation when she answered. There was no point if she already knew everything they will teach. It will only increase the chances of getting herself killed. She needed to live until 18 to protect her father. Andrew's lips curved. He told Arke he needn't worry. He recalled his little brother's anxious state when he was debating whether he should let Freya attend the academy or not. In the end, he requested Andrew to ask her indirectly. Andrew chuckled lightly. That Ice Mountain had become a slave for his daughter. Welcome everyone to today's graduation ceremony. I'm your host for today, Amber. Let's start with a speech from the headmaster, the host said with much enthusiasm. The speech from the headmaster was boring. It made Freya yawn several times. She nuzzled her face against Cinder, who was on her shoulder, making Cinder lick her with his tentacles. Freya squinted her eyes helplessly from the clammy saliva covering her face. Cinder, now that you've covered me with saliva, what should I do? She earned a juyu from Cinder, who was beaming. Freya's eyes went back to the stage. Luca was the best student of the year, graduating with a perfect score. It should be his turn to make his speech soon. Let us welcome the Student Council President and the best student of the year, His Highness Luca Jonathan Lafinia. Freya's eyes lit up when she saw Luca walking onto the stage. She didn't know he was the Student Council President. Luca was wearing the Academy's uniform, a dark blue dress shirt neatly tucked into black pants. His jacket was draped on his shoulders, making it flutter with every step he took. His temperament was cold and distant. One glance from him can make anyone freeze. Wait, that wasn't right. Was her cousin's gaze usually this cold? Luca had always resembled a giant Labrador in her mind. Who was this wolf on stage? We're graduating. Try your best to survive in the demon realm. Those who want to become my enemy, don't be shy. I'll sever all your limbs and feed your head to my little sister's pet. That's all. Luca's tone was extremely lazy and languid. By little sister he meant Freya. They were practically like siblings anyway. His half-lidded eyes showed his disinterest in everything around him. After saying that, he swiftly jumped down the stage and headed back to his seat. The crowd of students who were used to it applauded and cheered for him. The only person who was stunned had pink hair that was glistening like rose quartz and aquamarine eyes as clear as a crystal stream. Her eyes were widened slightly as she looked at her uncle, who showed indifference. Brother Luca ... Is he in a bad mood? She asked hesitantly. No, that's how he usually is, Andrew chuckled, when you're not around. The later part of the ceremony was half boring and half interesting. It depended on the student's performance. When it was Luca's turn, Freya sat up straight. The rest of his class was doing the stage play quite seriously, but Luca, the male lead ... recited the lines with no emotions whatsoever. Freya, who had to learn how to act as an assassin, couldn't help but pursed her lips into a straight line. But she still clapped for Luca. The ceremony ended and they went out waiting for Luca. She prepared a surprise for him after all. She hid behind Andrew and peeked at Luca. There was someone beside him. An attractive boy with brown hair and pink eyes. When their eyes met, Freya nodded her head while the boy returned her greeting. Her eyes darkened with a hidden meaning as the boy shook his head. So he's genuinely Brother Luca's friend, Freya thought. Brother Luca, she beamed and ran over. With her height, she could only hug Luca's legs. Luca didn't know Freya came today. His eyes widened as the frost in his eyes melted away. He picked her up immediately. The happiness in his heart reached its peak. It was due to the test that he wasn't able to see Freya as often as usual. Once every 3 days wasn't enough. The tenderness in his eyes made the boy beside him hang his mouth agape. Luca didn't pay his best friend any heed. He'd ask softly, "Why did you come here?" "I'm happy, but it's dangerous." Congratulations on graduating. Freya's smile was more brilliant than the sun. Her bright eyes made Luca see flowers blooming around her. She clapped her hands twice. Crystal butterflies appeared on top of them. The stream of sunlight made the butterflies' translucent wings glimmer. The blue cherry blossom flowers rained down from the butterflies like confetti. As the pale blue and purple mixed together, the glassy wings created an aurora effect. The breathtaking view of the flowers and butterflies made Luca stand there in a daze. The pleasant and fragrant smell in the air attracted the attention of many students. A few butterflies gently placed a blue flower crown onto Luca's head. One of them even landed on Luca's nose and tickled him before shattering into shards and glitter. "Do you like it?" Freya tilted her head like a puppy waiting for her owner's praise. Her eyes curved when Luca buried his face into her shoulder. His voice was trembling slightly. Yeah, I love it ... How can I not like something you gave me?" "Brother Luca has worked hard." She caressed his head. Freya let out a sigh of relief. Only she knew how long it took for her to make the flower crown. When she looked to the side, many students were staring at them. She knew it was going to attract attention, but she couldn't help feeling her face growing red. She asked Luca to let her down but was firmly rejected. Many of the students were surprised by how affectionate Luca could be. They were also mesmerized by Freya's beauty that can make flowers cower in shame. She was only 7, but her temperament couldn't be hidden. Freya could only smile politely. Out of the blue, she took out the pistol hidden under her dress and aimed at the bush, shooting without hesitation. Her movement was very swift, her eyes that were gentle cooled. The air around her turned cold. Assassin. Thank goodness she saw that number floating above the bushes. Thanks to her eyes of truth, she couldn't sense any bloodlust at all. "He's dead. Good job immobilizing him." Andrew approached them and patted Freya. "Let's head home." Luca finally remembered his forgotten friend. "See you around, James." "See you around." It was unclear who he said that for. Freya glanced at him, but she didn't bother to say anything. She just snuggled her head against Luca's chest and stopped when she felt secure. Luca chuckled at her cat-like habit and placed his hand at the back of her head, bringing her closer. Cinder stood on top of Freya's head and made himself comfortable after eating the assassin. Freya fought with her closing eyes before finally giving in after many sleepless nights. Luca noticed her even breath and his gaze grew gentle. He cast a heating spell around her and whispered, "Thank you for everything, my light." Arke woke up and yawned. He felt something grabbing his clothes, so he looked down. He gazed adoringly at Freya, who was curled up beside him. Her rose-pink hair was tangled as it spread all over the pillow. Her expression was very peaceful as she hugged Mr. Lulu in her arms. Arke reached out and combed her messy hair with his fingers with a small smile on his face. If only she could remain tiny like this forever. She's growing up too fast. She'll be 9 in a month. As he gently pried her little hands away, he froze. Why were her hands so cold? His heartbeat quickened. He felt as if thousands of ants crawled onto his back. He caressed Freya's face that was as cold as ice. Her hands dropped limply onto the bed. There was no pulse. Arke sat there in a daze, his eyes widened as his pupils trembled with fear. He shook her lightly, hoping she would open her eyes, but she never did. Freya, his voice quivered with uncertainty. Arke's volume increased each time he called out her name. Freya. Arke held his daughter in his arms. He felt his mind going blank. Tears streamed down his face as he hugged Freya tightly. It was like hugging a pile of snow, but Arke didn't let go. "Stop playing around. Don't scare me like that." Please, he hoped it was the doing of his mischievous daughter, praying that it was her usual little tricks. Freya simply stayed silent and unmoving. Her limbs were slightly stiff as her blood circulation stopped. The sun was no longer shining, was no longer warm. She became a wilted flower after full bloom. The Freya in his arms gradually became larger until she looked like a 16-year-old teenager. Arke's eyes widened as he shook uncontrollably. They were no longer in his room, but in a dark forest surrounded by black trees. Arke was too familiar with this scene. It was the same. The girl in his arms suddenly opened her eyes. Her pale aquamarine eyes were as gentle as ever, but what left her mouth made Arke weep while biting his lips. "Papa, wake up!" Freya's hurried voice made him jolt up. Concern was evident in her eyes. "Daddy, what happened?" Freya Arke was still in a daze. He seemed like he was half asleep. The tears running down his cheeks made him seem extremely pitiful yet beautiful. Freya nodded. Arke pulled her into a tight embrace. She was here. Breathing, living. His trembling calmed down little by little. It was just a dream. Freya didn't say anything. It should be a nightmare. But what kind of nightmare made Arke so agitated until his horns came out? She sat there and let her father cuddle her, hoping to ease his fear and trepidation. Arke's bat-like wings wrapped around her like a protective barrier, hoping to protect her from all the harm in the world. She hugged Arke back and started singing, "Stop your crying. It will be all right. I'm here now, and I'll hold you tight. The stars are singing, and so is the moon. Your heart will hold happiness. While your sorrows come to me, we'll bear the burden together. So wipe away your tears away. Sleep tight, my dear. Sleep tight now. Another day awaits. Another day awaits." Her voice was very soft and pleasant on its own. It was already a musical instrument. She made the lullaby so comforting that Arke indulged in her warmth subconsciously, forgetting he was the adult here. Since Arke was in a half-asleep state, her tranquil voice made him fall back to sleep. Freya sighed in relief. It was the first time Arke looked so pale. She used her butterflies to pull the blanket so that it covered him up to his neck. It was midnight. She never expected him to wake up. Arke was a light sleeper, but there was still a time when he would fall into a deep sleep. Plus, he hadn't slept for a week. After confirming he was asleep, Freya tiptoed to the balcony and stared emotionlessly at the man with light brown hair and hot pink eyes. He gave off the temperament of a cheetah. With his curved eyes, his playfulness held some arrogance. The gentleness in Freya's eyes vanished like the person singing the lullaby before wasn't her. A fake smile adorned her face. "You put him back to sleep," James hummed as she nodded. TSK using hypnosis on your own father. Well, whatever, here's the poison, 5 gold. Freya did use hypnosis that she learned from Luca on Ark. Luca specialized in using the gyukin as his weapon, so he knew many pieces of music that can affect a person's mind. Freya used a simple tune to make Arke go back to sleep. Her father looked too tired. Freya snapped her fingers as coins fell into the man's palm. He smiled satisfyingly at the money and mused, "You have a soft spot for your family, don't you?" Freya didn't deny what he said and smiled, "That's right. Bring me another dose next month, increase the amount." "All right, do you sell poisonous smoke?" "In bullet form." "What type of ammo?" The man tilted his head. 45 ACP. "Got it, no problem." James nodded after thinking. "Thanks, Gramps." Freya pushed her messy hair back. Thinking back to when she saw him at the academy, an indescribable feeling flashed through her eyes. Did brother Luca know his best friend was at least 1,000 years old? Attending the academy just to feel young again, this old grandpa. "TSK, you should call me older brother. Look at how handsome I am," he boasted, making Freya scrunch her face. She let out a perfunctory whatever, making James fake cry. "Well, pleasure doing business with you. See you next month." James jumped backward and waved, making Freya nod. It all happened when she was 6. The system told her she had to consume a certain type of poison to increase her powers. It'll help when facing off with the hero. And so she contacted the place the system told her behind Arke's back. Cherry Cake. When she first heard the shop's name, she held some doubt. Who wouldn't be skeptical after hearing this name unless it's a dessert store? But this was indeed the perfect shop to buy poison from. With a blood oath, they guaranteed to protect the customer's identity and never accept assassination requests. Plus, they're not nosy and the boss is strong enough to sneak in the palace without Arke noticing. It's not because the barrier's flawed, it's because James specialized in portals and teleportation. What Freya liked was that he won't ask her why an 8-year-old is buying poison as long as she paid. Before she drank the poison, Freya slit her wrist and stored up some of her blood inside a glass bottle. She was going to let her dad drink it later. He looked too ghastly. After making sure it was enough, she licked the cut so that it'll heal faster. Freya pulled the cork and drank the bitter liquid she received. "Can't they make it honey-flavored?" She let out a grunt and fell onto her knees. She felt her body drowning in cold sweat as she fought the burning pain. Freya felt as if her skin was melting off and thousands of mites have burrowed into her skin, eating out her organs slowly. She felt as if someone was pricking her heart with needles. Slowly, one by one, the needles penetrated through the most vulnerable organ a demon could have. Freya gripped onto her skirt and bit her collar to prevent her whimpering from getting louder. She must not close her eyes when the poison was in action, or else she'd be a goner. She fought with the poison for hours, until the sun rose. The sun in the demon realm was blue, the whole sky turned purple with strokes of pink here and there. It was beautiful. She sat there catching her breath and wiping away her sweat. Her eyes were empty as though she had detached herself from the world. Her butterflies have some limitations. First, she can't heal herself with them. Second, the pain of the victim will be transferred to her. Third, unless she had mana, the butterflies won't heal. Fourth, she could heal only one person at a time. The main reason for the fourth limitation is that the pain of the victim will distract her. If it was a cut, she can heal up to 4 people simultaneously, but if it's during a war, how can she heal an army with broken limbs without dying from the pain? That's where the poison she bought, the Devil's Tears, comes in. This poison is used to make prisoners admit and reveal secrets. 1 drop of it can make a grown demon babble. It doesn't have much impact on one's health, but the effect of it is excruciatingly painful. The first time, Freya only had a drop, and she felt like her skin was burning away from her muscles. This is exactly what she wanted, to train herself to endure the pain until she grows numb to it. That way, even if all of the people precious to her fall ill at the same time, she could heal them. Freya smiled particularly to no one as her tears from the residue pain glide down her cheeks. The sunlight gently caressed her face, making her porcelain face glow. There was happiness in her eyes, but her quivering eyelashes made one's heart hurt for her. "Good job. It's all for them, you can do it." Freya let out a sound of acknowledgement as the pink rectangle glowed. Her eyes were extremely loving as she supported her head with the wall. She closed her eyes, it was fine, endure it for them. Dad's going to wake up. I should go back. She slapped her cheeks and got up. Freya wiggled into the blankets and snuggled against Arke. She hugged her beluga plush toy tightly as her eyes darkened. Those who are precious to her, she will protect them, she will not lose them. Anyone who dares interfere and break this peace will die in her hands. In the dimly lit library, Freya used her arms as a cushion as she laid her head on them and rested her eyes. The little sunlight that seeped through the curtains lightly brushed against her delicate features. She was taking a small break after reading through a few philosophy books. The concepts of demons weren't really different from humans, it's just a tad wilder. Her eyelashes quivered slightly when she felt someone coming into the library. She pretended to be asleep. 2 demons, these footsteps weren't her dad's, nor was it Kaiden's. She gripped her dagger steadily in the hidden compartment of her dress. The moment one of them entered her vicinity, she swung the dagger to where she predicted the throat to be. Freya cast the intruder a cold glance from the corner of her eyes while the dagger pressed onto their neck. A familiar face entered her sight. Austin stood there with his hands held up obediently. His amber eyes that were widened slightly went back to normal as he grinned at her cheekily. These two tend to change the way their footsteps sound for fun. Freya lowered the dagger as she scolded, "Idiots. Didn't you learn how to knock?" "We didn't want to wake you up," Austin defended, earning a sigh from Freya. She clicked her tongue, but she couldn't help softening her gaze. She mercilessly retorted, "So you rather be killed? You should be glad I used the dagger instead of my pistol." Well, I was prepared. I would have avoided it if I deemed it was dangerous, Austin explained as if he was wronged, like a puppy that was accused of stealing a drumstick by its owner. Freya rolled her eyes and didn't continue with the topic. In terms of strength, the twins were several times better than her. They can use buffs and spells, it's not fair. While they were talking, Alistar silently took off his coat and draped it on Freya. She was wearing a sleeveless dress today. It was quite cold in the library. She had the habit of blasting the winter crystals to their lowest temperature. Freya thanked Alistar and asked languidly, "So, what are you guys doing here? You guys visited yesterday." The twins usually visited very frequently, so Freya wasn't surprised. When they were younger, they would bug their father to teleport them here. After learning how to teleport themselves, they visited Freya at least every 4 days to play. Freya had to thank the fact they had school, or else they would have visited every day. It's not like she hated playing with them, but it was tiring. The 2 little monkeys made her run here and there until she was devastated. It had only gotten better in recent years. After growing up, they finally understood the beauty of sitting and sipping tea peacefully while reading a book or two. Freya, that was spared from stamina training, felt ecstatic. "TSK, we're going to Academy tomorrow. I'm scared you're going to miss me too much, so I came to see you," Austin tutted. Freya was genuinely impressed. How thick-skinned was he to say something like that with a straight face? Freya was about to tear that skin off, but Alistar beat her to it. "Are you sure you're not the one missing her?" Freya was expecting Austin to retort, but his reaction made her eyes widen before letting out a chuckle. His ears flushed pink, but he was still trying his best to keep his composure. "Are you not going to miss us?" Alistar turned to Freya. She could practically feel his anticipation through those droopy eyes. He reminded her of a golden retriever. Alistar was usually very reticent and silent. He likes to convey his feelings through action. But when he speaks, he gets straight to the point. Of course, Freya gently knocked her knuckles on their foreheads. Though not connected by blood, these two were her little brothers mentally, her childhood friends. They grew up together. She was used to them being by her side, of course. She couldn't help feeling a little sad. She sighed. They grew up so fast. They were so cute when they were younger. Is this how it feels like to be a parent? During the first 2 years of attending the academy, students weren't allowed to go home as they pleased. They were only allowed to return during the 2 holidays, one at mid-year and the other at the end of the year, or when an emergency occurs at home. After the 2nd year, they can decide whether they want to remain at the dormitory or go back home after classes. She felt nostalgic. Luca whined for a whole 2 weeks about how lonely he was without her during his first break. "I'll be a little lonely," she sighed honestly, "but it's only for 2 years. Both of them hugged her almost simultaneously. They were the ones who were most reluctant to part with her. She patted their backs. It was only now that she realized the 2 little brats from before have already surpassed her height by a head. Freya was glad they agreed to go to the academy instead of fussing to take the exam with her. She took so much time to convince them. They are still young and need more friends. It's been a while since I've seen you two duel. She pulled away from the hug. Can I see it before you guys go? It was a request from Freya. They would never bear to reject anything she wants. The twins followed behind her to the training room, as if they were guarding her. Freya sat in the viewing area and watched intently. The two were evenly matched in terms of magic, so Freya specially requested them not to use it. Austin pulled out a black obsidian claymore from the stigma on the back of his hand, while Alistar pulled out a transparent crystal sword from his. As the two weapons clashed, something landed on Freya's lap, making her jolt. She soon relaxed when she saw that it was Cinder. He snuggled against her before falling asleep again. Freya patted it lovingly. She didn't bring the creature to the library before, because it was sleeping soundly on her bed. She didn't have the heart to wake it up. Cinder, who felt anxious without his master's presence, searched for Freya the second he woke up. As she stroked Cinder, her eyes went back to the twins. The way Austin fought was wild and straightforward. With every swing, one can feel his immeasurable power. On the contrary, Alistar was very elegant and restrained. Every move was made after much consideration and calculation. The style of the two was like the sun and the moon. Freya enjoyed the scene. A smile tugged on her lips. They've improved. She didn't need to worry about them. They would be fine at the academy. Freya was someone who felt uneasy about every single little thing. Though she never expressed it, the anxiety she felt every day had suffocated her to the point that she felt she might go crazy. She was someone who initially had nothing. Now she had everything she could ever ask for. She was afraid everything would vanish. She didn't want to lose anything. Was she being too greedy? This happiness and warmth was a double-edged sword, but she couldn't help but want to monopolize it all. Like a child who had tasted the sweetness of candy, she didn't want to go back to eating tasteless and stale rice crackers. I've seen enough, her angelic voice reverberated in the training hall. Freya chuckled. Even if they fought all the way until midnight, there would be no victor. The two were exhausted after fighting with someone with the same strength. They walked towards Freya and collapsed beside her. They both leaned against her, resting each of their heads on her shoulders. They'd been doing this since they were children. Her butterflies handed the water bottles to them under her command. Happy 13th birthday, Alistar, Austin, she beamed as she patted their heads. Stop sulking, I remember. The party is tonight anyways, I can't forget even if I wanted to. She recalled their surprised face when she asked them why they were here and giggled. Her giggle made the two look at her. Both of their gazes were gentle. How can they not love her? Freya put a small box in each of their hands and asked them to open it. A dark green crystal butterfly flew out of Alistar's box, while a light green one flew out of Austin's. The butterflies fluttered and flew up, leaving traces of sparkles as they flew. They flew in front of them and wrote a big and shiny happy birthday before shooting into the twins' chest, making both of them grunt. For protection, she took the initiative to explain, it can prevent one fatal injury. The two looked at her stunned. The butterflies are a part of your soul. You can't just. It's fine, it won't activate unless you're about to die. It's just for precaution, in case I don't arrive in time. She interrupted with a smile. Her voice turned pitiful. Are you going to nag me on your birthday? Their brows furrowed. Even if it's a fragment, if the soul is harmed. She'll suffer the consequences of excruciating pain or even memory loss. But for Freya, a little pain was nothing compared to their safety. Thank you, both of them whispered, making Freya smile. The three sat there silently, enjoying each other's companion. It definitely won't be the last time they spend their time with each other, but it would certainly be a long time until the next time. Christmas special. In the dark room, the 13-year-old got down from her bed carefully as she tiptoed towards the door. It wasn't until she was out that she let out the breath she was holding. Freya cheered in her heart. She got out successfully. Arca didn't wake up. Her bed was just beside her dad's. After all, it was safer for her if any assassins come to visit her at night. Cinder, who followed her out, was still in a daze. The sun wasn't even out yet. What did his master want to do? Freya patted the furball and proceeded to the kitchen. In her previous world, today was supposed to be Christmas. Though the demon realm doesn't celebrate it, she thought it would be nice to use this day to make some treats for her family and friends. It was 4 in the morning. The chefs have yet to wake up, thus the kitchen belonged to her. Freya hummed a tune as she got ready the ingredients. She knew how to cook and bake some simple desserts. She loved desserts, but she didn't have any chefs in her previous life, so she could only learn it herself. Freya clicked her tongue. The ingredients in the demon realm aren't aesthetically pleasing at all, especially the fruits. She rolled up her sleeves and tied her hair into a simple ponytail. She wrote down the recipe she frequently used onto a piece of paper neatly, just so she won't miss anything later. She first sifted a cup of all-purpose flour, half a cup of cocoa powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and a small pinch of salt into a big bowl. Then she cracked 4 eggs into another bowl. Using a magic mixer, she made sure the egg whites and egg yolks were thoroughly incorporated until it's slightly on the whiter side. After that, she added a cup of powdered sugar, a little at a time until the mixture was fluffy. After adding 3/4 cups of vegetable oil and 2 teaspoons of vanilla essence, she beat it until it was combined. Freya didn't like making a mess, so she washed up the magic mixer immediately after using it. Her actions were very quick as she didn't want the fluffy mixture to sink. Finally, the dry ingredients were skillfully folded in, and the batter was finally done. She looked at the pink batter as her lips pursed into a straight line. The cocoa powder in the demon realm was pink, so it naturally turned out to be pink, but Freya couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. She was making a chocolate cake ... color just ... well, whatever. And Freya poured the batter into a tray and sent it inside the preheated oven at 180 C for 30 minutes. Cinder, who was napping on the counter, flew over to Freya and landed on her head, earning a nuzzle from his owner. Freya looked at the used tools and sighed. It's time to clean up the kitchen. This was the part she hated the most. While she was washing the dishes, she caught Cinder trying to eat the eggshells from the corner of her eyes. Cinder, she said in a warning tone, making Cinder halt in his actions and close his mouth. He then turned and looked at her pitifully. His big teary eyes made Freya's heart go soft. That's dirty, I'll let you eat some cake later with Dad. She threw the colorful eggshells away. While the cake was baking, she cut the fruits into more pleasing shapes. The blue, bumpy fruits that tasted like strawberries were cut into heart shapes, while the white melons that tasted like grapes were cut into little snowmen. She also made some vanilla frosting while she was at it. Once the cake cooled, she started assembling everything. Of course, some of the fruits didn't have the chance of becoming decoration since they ended up in her tummy. Cinder had his share too. Fruits paired with frosting were the best. It was already 6 a.m. When she was done with everything. The apricity of the sun made her smile. After telling the chef to serve the cake during lunch, she trotted back to her room. She changed her sleeping gown into another one before going back to her sleeping chambers. Where did you go? Arke's hoarse voice entered her ears the moment she opened the door. Daddy ... Good morning, Freya chimed. Arke was still in bed, sleepiness evident in his eyes. His bed hair made Freya avert her eyes. She mustn't laugh. It seems like her father just woke up not long ago. Morning. So where did you go? Arke repeated his question. Went to the toilet, she casually replied while he just hummed. There was a toilet connected to the room. Arke glanced at the bed beside his. He could tell after using his magic, there wasn't a bit of warmth. She got up quite early. His brows furrowed, a hint of displeasure flashed through his eyes. When did his daughter learn how to lie to him? Freya wasn't even putting in any effort lying to him. She knew there was no point. Her father was too smart. She plopped back to her bed and closed her eyes. I'm sleeping till noon. Good night. ... Didn't you just say good morning? Freya replied to him by burrowing her face into the pillow even more, hugging Mr. Lulu in her arms. No matter how old she gets, this plush toy of hers will stay with her. Arke yawned and got up. He went over to Freya's bed. He kissed her head and ruffled her hair before he went out. All of his meetings were scheduled early in the morning today. Freya woke up exactly at noon. After the maids dressed her up, she headed to the dining room. Arke was skimming through the documents in his hands before looking up. Did you sleep well? Freya nodded and took her seat next to him. As they ate, Freya told him about her plans for the day. She was already a teenager, she didn't need her father to be her bodyguard, but Arke couldn't help feeling worried about this assailable daughter of his. The chocolate cake was finally served as dessert. Freya's eyes gleamed as Arke took a bite. She looked at her father with anticipation, like a puppy waiting to be praised. "It's delicious." Arke patted her head. The chef had already reported to him that Freya made something in the kitchen, and when that happens, she usually made desserts. The puppy that got her praise was in a good mood. "I'll go make more. Then we can give it to Kaiden and the rest." Before she could get up, Arke used some magic to bind his excited daughter to the chair. "Eat up first. You can do that later." Faced with her father's magic, there was nothing she could do. "Okay." As they ate, Freya suddenly beamed, "Daddy, Merry Christmas." Mary, what? Arke looked at her in confusion. Did she learn another language? Freya used the language of her formal world. Of course he didn't understand. "It's nothing." Freya watched with soft eyes as Cinder chomped down the cake. That just made him even more curious. Arke sighed and ate the cake silently. He should be free today. "I'll make the cakes with you." Freya thought she misheard. "You'll make the cakes with me." She earned a nod from Arke. Freya's eyes widened. Her father has never stepped inside the kitchen before. "There won't be any explosions, right?" And so, the father-daughter pair made cakes the whole afternoon. Freya looked at Arke, who was baking like a professional patissier. Her lips couldn't help but twitch. She only taught him once. How come he's getting better at it than her? She wanted to have skills like these too. As she was sulking, the white particles raining from the sky outside the windows caught her attention. Daddy, it's snowing." She tugged Arke's clothes eagerly. "And?" Freya happily went over to the balcony, not caring whether her father followed or not. This was her first white Christmas since retaining her memory. Her cotton pink hair was covered in snowflakes, making them seem like ornaments. Freya's skin that was as white as the snow seemed to have blended into the scenery. It was a scene commonly seen in portraits. Her side view gave the viewers a sense of loneliness, but her eyes were bright and filled with warmth. As Freya held the snow in her palms, she made a silent wish in her heart. "Please make it so that these happy days won't melt away like snow." In the stone garden, Freya gently stroked the nine-tailed fox's head with her right hand while brushing him with her left hand. The fox in front of her purred as Freya groomed him. "It's done." Freya put the brush down and scratched his chin with a satisfied smile. Kaiden didn't turn into the Arctic fox she first met. Instead, he used another form of his, a nine-tailed fox with the size of a king-size bed. Kaiden pounced and pushed her down easily with his paws before licking her face. It made Freya giggle. "Why don't you turn back to your humanoid form? You dote on me more in this form." Kaiden rubbed his nose against hers coquettishly. Freya sighed softly and shook her head helplessly. Well, there was one way to beat this sly fox. She grabbed his ear, making his movement pause. Freya smiled and pinched the tip of his ear, then proceeded to trace along the edges. This action of hers made Kaiden purr and shiver. His eyes flashed black before turning misty gray. With eyes filled with mirth, she asked slyly, "Say it again, do I not treat you well?" Kaiden's eyes widened before narrowing. With a poof, he turned back to his humanoid form. His ear was still pinched by Freya, but he ignored the electrifying pleasure. Kaiden whispered into her ears in a dangerously low voice, "If you keep provoking me, there's no telling how long I can hold back." Freya wasn't frightened at all. Despite being pinned onto the ground, she remained in a relaxed manner. 14 years old, a minor. The only reason she could act so brazen was because she knew Kaiden won't force her, nor will he do something to hurt her. She released his poor ear that was pink on the tip and stroked his head. Freya knew that she was his soulmate. She knew that he loved her, but she never gave him a definite answer. It may be cruel, but she wanted to give Kaiden more time to decide. She didn't want to be together with him just because she was his soulmate. He needed to see her as herself and deem whether Freya was suitable for him or not. She was very clear on which lines can be crossed and which shouldn't be. She did love him. From the moment she saw him, she felt attracted to him. If this was what people call love at first sight, then so be it. There was no constant blushing, nor was there any frequent heart racing for her, but just by being by his side, she felt extremely safe and comfortable. That was enough. These were the qualities she looked for. She wasn't finding someone who would say sickly sweet words just to make her heart jump. She was looking for a life companion. Although it's hard to define their relationship right now, There's no doubt he was someone she held dearly. Caden naturally knew what she was thinking about. Though he knew she was the only one for him, and he had long fallen for Freya as a person, he never pushed it. After all, she is like a kitten, the more you chase after her, the farther she'll run. However, she might occasionally come over and act coy if you don't move. They still have many years to come, no need to be hasty. She'll be his eventually. This kind of tacit understanding that existed between the two made it so nothing was awkward. Caden slumped down and burrowed his face into her neck. Freya didn't push him away, she patted him dotingly. She pressed her head against his and complained, "You're too heavy, turn back into your fox form." He only gave her a languid glance before continuing scenting her. Caden hummed and bit down on her shoulder. It wasn't painful, but it left a visible mark. A nine-tailed fox has a very possessive nature. They would leave their scent on their partner ... and then there's the marking. Biting the nape of their partner will bound their souls together so the nine-tailed fox can find their partner even if they want to hide. For the partner, being marked meant that they had to be prepared to be with the fox for life. After all, the nature of a predatory beast lies within the fox. They will hunt their partners for life and make sure they stay beside them ... even if it's by force. "What's that for?" Freya yelped in surprise. Caden looked at the mark he made with contentment as his eyes flashed gold. It was only after that he turned back into his Arctic fox form and snuggled against her. "It's going to rain." His voice reverberated in her head. A few minutes after he said that, red droplets rained from the sky. The rain in the demon realm was very different from her past life. The scarlet blood produced a fishy smell. It was unpleasant. The white flower on the side of the trail was stained scarlet, making it ominous. Caden turned back to his humanoid form and tugged her into his embrace. "Let's head inside." Caden carried her easily. Freya didn't resist. She didn't like the rain. Most demons hated the rain. They had to stay indoors to avoid becoming a bloody mess since magic doesn't work on it. It was a weird phenomenon, but luckily it only happens twice a year. Caden sat on the bed and placed her on his lap. He waved his hands as the tray of desserts floated over to them. He fed her bites after bites, his actions skillful as he had done it many times. Freya sighed. "In my past life, I would be killing targets all around the world at this age. I feel like I'm getting lazier." Caden rubbed his chin on her head. "It's fine. Just do what you want to." Freya once thought that Caden knew everything that happened in her past life, but that wasn't the case. Most people didn't remember their past lives, so he could only see how they died and not what happened in their past. A soul can have many lives. He told her that the lives looked like balls of fire, black representing the past, blue representing the present. Those things are called blossoms. She had a white one because she remembers her past. He could only see a simple summary of what happened in her life. "You have a red blossom. I can't read it, it's locked." When Caden told her that, she asked what it meant. But even he didn't know what it meant. Since it was something that happened in the past, Freya just chose to ignore it. It was probably sealed for some reason. "Your birthday is coming up in a few months. What do you want?" Caden cooed, hugging her from behind. He nuzzled his face into her neck and inhaled her scent. A whiff of pleasant gardenia and sunshine entered his nose. His tail started wagging subconsciously. This happens very often when the fox is with their favorite person. "Anything is fine," she answered after pondering for a while. "Guns, swords, daggers ... There's nothing else she wants. Other weapons don't pique her interest. She has many shooting ranges, gardens, libraries ... all over the demon realm. Whether it was the south, east, north, or west ... She has her own palace." "Then it'll be a surprise." He smiled as his lips touched her nape. "She's too defenseless." Caden averted his gaze from the pale and slender nape. "Ah, it'll be your debutante ball soon, won't it?" Freya nodded and furrowed her brows. In the demon realm, debutantes usually fall between 16 years of age, but the princesses have to have their debut earlier, at the age of 14. Caden poked the center of her brows, making them relax. He asked, "What's wrong? Do you need help with the preparations?" Freya shook her head. "Usually the princesses host the ceremony, but Daddy said that he'll prepare everything for me. It's just that I don't know what to perform." The princess performing at the start of the debutante ball is a tradition of the demon realm. It can be anything, ranging from playing an instrument to fighting with demonic beasts. It wasn't for the people to see, it's more of an expression of gratefulness towards the demon kings and being filial towards her father. Freya could play many musical instruments, maybe she'll do that. You can just skip performing if you don't want to. None of us would insist, Kaiden told her gently. No, I want to do something. A sudden idea surfaced in her mind, that should be fine. Kaiden saw her eyes sparkling and felt his heart skipping a beat. He gazed away as his eyes turned pink. Ah, she's too cute. You found the answer, he asked softly. She beamed and nodded, she'll just have to practice a little. She snuggled against Kaiden and rested her eyes. Hopefully, everything will go smoothly during the debutante ball. Professor Luca. Luca inclined his head, gesturing the student to proceed with her question. However, her voice wouldn't come out the moment those blood-red eyes met with hers. A faint blush tinted her cheeks. They were so lucky to get such a handsome professor, but he was just too attractive. His long violet hair was braided loosely as it shined under the reflection of the sun. His distinct features had a sense of oppression, but when he smiled, it gave off a warm and gentle vibe. With the flower filters reserved for male leads in an idol drama that she had added, she couldn't look away. The question had long flown to the back of her mind, leaving it blank. Could it be she's fated to be the heroine? The forbidden student-teacher relationship could be hers. Luca, who stood behind the podium, waited for the student's question, only to find the gaze that was looking at him turning a little strange. What is your question? His voice snapped the student out of her daydream. Realizing the whole class was looking at her, her whole person turned red. Well, she couldn't be more embarrassed, right? Do you have a lover? Luca's artificial smile did not falter. We're in class. Please ask questions relevant to the topic. The student was disappointed, but it wasn't only her who wanted to know the answer. Luca never talked about himself, except for his name and the fact that he's royalty. They knew nothing about their professor. Thus, the whole class started whining. Come on, Professor. Tell us. Class is almost over anyway. You're taking leave for the next few days, is it to meet your lover? Luca's head started to hurt. He helplessly sighed, I don't have a lover. But he did have a savior. When he was walking through a black, endless tunnel. She showed up and lighted the way to the exit. Demons were stronger compared to humans. Child labor isn't life-threatening, but it happened anyway. Shortly after he was born, his mother passed away. As the young child that had earned the nickname Cursed Prince, he had to endure criticisms from everyone around him. He pretended not to care, but emotions weren't something a 4-year-old can control. His father treated him well, but they never had a heart-to-heart talk. No, he never wanted to open his heart to his father or anyone for that matter. He didn't want to get hurt. He started avoiding demons, he started staying in his room, he closed himself off. Andrew, being a father for the first time, didn't know what to do. He thought it would be all right after a few months. After all, boys have their own pride. However, many springs came and winters passed. The child had already turned 10. 10 years was a blink of an eye for demons, not to mention Andrew, who had lived for a century. That wasn't the case for Luca. It was a long time. Spending 5 years in loneliness was painful. He did nothing wrong, he never asked to be born. So, why did everyone despise him? It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair at all. Was he really cursed? Luca, there's someone you need to meet. When Luca raised his head, he saw the clearest eyes he had ever seen. Like diamonds, they were shining. There was no hate, no indignation, no disgust. This is Freya, your baby cousin. His steps were hesitant. Gently he reached out his hand. His movements halt, his hand trembled slightly. He shouldn't taint her. A warm sensation wrapped around his fingers, his hand that was withdrawing stilled. Baby Freya looked at him with those big round eyes, her lips tugged up. She's calling you, Andrew chuckled. I told her that she'll be seeing her brother. It seems like she likes you. Luca's eyes widened. He felt his heart tightening as a surge of warmth wrapped around it. Did he deserve her fancy? I may not be a good father, but I'm sure you'll be a good older brother. I'll try my best. Time flew by and both of them grew. Luca had to go to the academy. Honestly, he hated the academy. It took away the time he could spend with Freya. He would get excellent grades, be polite just to make the teachers trust him ... and then he'll ask for leaves using random reasons, just to visit Freya. Such days like today were his favorite, but what he feared most ... happened. The teenage boy stood rooted to the ground. He felt his heartbeat accelerating as if it would explode. "My lady, you shouldn't get too close with His Highness." "Brother Luca?" Why, Freya continued sucking on her lollipop. "His mother was killed by him. I don't want that to happen to your highness." Luca could only hear his thundering heart. Will those eyes look at him with hatred? No, that can't happen ... He'll go crazy. She can't know. She was his hope ... She was his Freya ... She can't leave him. He needed her. But ... He also wanted to see how she'll react. ... Brother Luca won't hurt me. He never will, she smiled sweetly. But Nanny, if you keep saying things that hurt Brother Luca, I might hurt you. Those innocent eyes sent chills down the nanny's spine. The sincerity in her voice ... She meant what she said. A child of a predator will never be prey. Freya will forgive you this one time because you were worried about her, she added as her eyes went back to normal. Yaya Luca's voice entered her ears. She brightened immediately. Brother Luca, you're here. Freya let go of the nanny's hands and rushed over into his embrace. She pouted, "You're late." "I'm sorry," he kissed her cheeks. Luca's scarlet eyes met with the trembling nanny's. He didn't say anything, but his message was relayed. "Tell my uncle that Freya's with me." He picked Freya up and headed to the garden. "Brother Luca, did you hear what she said?" Freya snuggled into the crook of his neck. "Don't lie." ... This little cousin of his was very sharp. She was only 4 years old, but her sixth sense was incredibly accurate. "Do you think I'm cursed? Do you think my mother dying after child labor is my fault?" "I don't know. But if Brother Luca's mother has to die for you to be here ... then Freya thinks it's worth it." Freya cupped his cheek. "So stop trembling. Freya will always love Brother. I need Brother, so don't deny your existence." For years, some told him it was not his fault, but those were just white lies. Maybe because Freya's a child, she was able to say those bold words ... but those words pierced his heart. No one told him he was needed. "Don't cry ... Was it because I bad-mouthed Auntie?" "I'm sorry." The child in his arms panicked as she also became teary. "Brother Luca, Freya's sorry, so don't cry." For the first time in 10 years, tears trickled down the cheeks of the 14-year-old boy who had been persisting. He rested his head on Freya's shoulder. She was his salvation. In the end, Freya started sobbing. A child was a child. She was confused and distressed. Why was her precious brother crying? "Yaya, don't cry," Luca coaxed as he pressed his forehead against hers. But Brother's crying," she sniffled. Okay, I won't cry, so don't cry. I'll feel sad if Freya cries." "Really?" But Freya can't stop crying," she choked. Luca could only rub her back in circular motions to calm her down. There was no time for him to continue crying. After her tears stopped flowing, she showed Luca her sticky hands. "Brother, I want to wash my hands." The lollipop melted. "Let's go. After that, I'll give you another one." Luca sighed. How nostalgic. 10 years had passed since then. His eyes softened subconsciously, making his students more curious. Their professor could make that type of face. Before they could ask, a knock came from the door. The pink-haired girl poked her head out. Her eyes were curved into a gentle arc. "It seems like my braiding skills improved. It remained the same as this morning." Such a beauty ... She didn't seem like a student. When Luca saw her, his whole person lit up. His gentle voice made the students shiver. "My Yaya, what are you doing here?" Freya walked over and looked at him silently. Luca felt inexplicably nervous. Did he do something wrong? A satisfied smile crept upon her face. Teasing her cousin was still very pleasant. "Brother Luca, you're late, so I came to pick you up. Did you forget tomorrow's my debutante?" She hugged him and sulked. Since her whispers went unheard by the whole class, the whole situation seemed ambiguous. Their professor even wrapped his arms around her. Of course not. The class has ended, I'll go take my things from the office. His voice was filled with indulgence. He glanced at the class. You guys are dismissed. Professor, is she your? I'm his lover. She finished the sentence with a smile. Luca sighed helplessly and said nothing, making mischief again. Honey, were you keeping it a secret? Did you want to cheat on me? Freya covered her mouth with her hands. Tears were on the verge of spilling. Men are all liars. You said you'll love only me. Hick. No, the professor is very loyal. We'll keep an eye on him for you. Miss, we'll make sure he stays faithful. The teary-eyed Freya. Thank you, you kids are so thoughtful. Now she's calling people older than her kids? Luca felt a headache coming. He directly princess carried her. Yaya, let's go. We'll be late. Bye. I'll see you guys next time. Freya parted with them reluctantly. It was fun while it lasted. He raised his brow, asking through his eyes, was that fun? Freya, with her eyes curved, yep. Who asked him to pamper her that much? Now, she feared nothing. But his heart still went soft. He pecked her forehead. Okay, as long as you're happy. Yeah, isn't this too revealing? Luca asked with his brows furrowed. His protectiveness meter rose to the max. He took off the outer layer of his handfu, wanting to drape it over her. But she rejected it. It's only for the performance, I'll change after that. Freya looked exceedingly prepossessing. Her slender and pale waist was revealed out in the air. Her sleeves were made out of sheer silk. It was puffy, but the rubber that wrapped around her wrist at the end highlighted her slim arms. The long silk ribbons attached to her wrist fluttered every time she moved, making her look divine. Her forehead chain that hung purple diamonds jingled with every slight movement, while her peach blossom hair was decorated with violet roses. Her flawless beauty made the servants take glances one after another. Other than the selected ones who were bound by blood contracts, they rarely get to see their princess. Seeing Luca's uncertainty, she ushered, brother, just go to the sitting area. It's going to start soon. At an unknown time, Luca, who was wavering, was already pushed in front of the banquet hall entrance. Freya was about to sneak away when a pair of arms wrapped around her shoulders. Freya looked up and saw Luca gazing down at her. Her smile stiffened. He looked angry. She gulped and let out a hee-hee. As she thought, the face of her cousin is priceless. Not to mention, he became a professor at the age of 24. When will she get a sister-in-law? Oh, a brother-in-law wouldn't be bad too. So, where are you escaping to? Luca met her eyes. Has uncle approved of your costume? Freya gave up on struggling. Luca didn't have the slightest intention to let her go. She smiled and lied, of course, Papa knows. Lying to me now, are we? Our Yaya is growing braver day by day. His menacing smile made Freya shrink. Her eyes averted as an awkward smile appeared on her pretty features. The clothes weren't too revealing, it only revealed her abdomen. Freya had worn more revealing clothes for missions that required close contact with the targets. This was already quite modest for her. Brother, won't you just see what I've prepared? I've practiced so hard. Luca averted his eyes. Her puppy eyes were too effective. He sighed and nodded, making Freya beam as she kissed his cheek. Then, uncle doesn't know what you're performing. Luca raised his brow. Nope, I told Daddy it's a surprise. She smiled brightly. A sense of helplessness flashed through his eyes. He pecked her forehead. His eyes landed on her 11-line abs. He really wanted to cover her up. After Luca went in, she exhaled. It would be time for her to enter after a few minutes. She had performed at banquets in her previous life before. It's not her first time. But this time, she couldn't help feeling nervous. It'll be fine, Freya murmured to herself. She took a deep breath as the doors opened. All eyes landed on her, but she did not panic. She held her head high as she gracefully made her entrance. Freya headed to her family and friends and curtsied. When Arke saw what his daughter was wearing, his brows furrowed, displeasure flared in his eyes. He held back the urge to roll her into a sushi roll with a blanket. Everyone present had the same thought as him. Freya saw their thoughts blazing through their eyes and made a quick escape to the stage. The music started playing after she gave her signal. The moment she started dancing, everyone was mesmerized. Freya was very good at acting, thus her expressions were all on point. Her seductive gaze made people quiver. Her cheerful smile made people smile along. Her affectionate glance made people envious of the one receiving it. Her sorrowful expression made their eyes wet. Freya incorporated a few dances she had learned in her previous life. Using ballet, her gracefulness soared as she expressed herself as a maiden in love. Then, with classical Chinese dance, the maiden in love matured and got elegance. The silk ribbon highlighted this part wonderfully. When her lover died, the music turned tense. Freya wielded a sword in her hands, her expression turned cold with despair. She used gymnastics when dealing with the sword. Every movement was clean and smooth. She twirled the sword like it was a pen and played around with it. At last, the sword stabbed into the maiden's heart, a smile tugged on her lips. The way she reached out to the crowd, smiling as tears poured out, captivated the audience. The maiden has finally reunited with her lover. The stage turned dark, the performance has ended. It took a while for everyone to snap out of their daze. Kaiden was the first person to applaud as the rest soon followed. They can't believe they got jealous of a shadow. That shadow of a man that acted as her lover, they wanted his place. Freya spread her wings that she gained recently. A pair of white and a pair of black feathered wings grew on her back. She leaped and landed on the second floor where her family and friends were. How was the performance? You did very well. Arke stood up and patted her head. Freya brightened. Hee, thank you, Papa. Oscar and Andrew praised her before they started joking around, making Sophia smack her husband's head and apologize to Freya. Andrew suddenly felt that being single has its perks. Freya dear, that was spectacular. Sophia smiled at her. Very wonderful, Kaiden praised as he draped his houri over her. Though it would be better if we're the only ones watching. Yeah, they don't deserve it. Austin glowered at the crowd, making them lower their heads. Alistair blocked Freya from the view of the crowd and said, we were all mesmerized by you. Go change. Luca beckoned gently. Freya nodded obediently. The maids changed her into a flowery gown that had a gradient of pastel pink and baby blue. Her hair remained the same, just that a tiara now sat on top of her head and the forehead chain was removed. While she was changing, Andrew asked, did you hire a dancer to teach her? I never seem to see her tutors. No, Arke denied. She doesn't have any tutors. I don't allow demons with too much power to be close to her. Freya had always been smart. It would be fitting to call her a genius. Arke knew she was hiding something, but he had never asked. She'll tell him when the time is right. He trusted his daughter. She practiced very hard for the performance today. Kaiden chuckled. She can be a professional dancer, Sophia commented. If she said so, then it can't be wrong. She used to be a dancer after all. It wasn't easy to dance, let alone think up a whole choreography. Freya practiced for weeks just for that few minutes on stage. Some people practice for years just for that few seconds. Such is the cruelty of the world, not only in dancing but many other scenarios as well. I'm back. Freya cast a glance at the demons inside, still as barbaric as ever. Well, as long as they have fun. Is it too noisy for you? Arke asked Freya, who sat beside him. She shook her head. It's fine for them to have fun once in a while. Demons have good hearing. They looked at Freya with glimmering eyes. Their princess was so kind. Freya saw their gazes and returned a polite smile. Anyone who looks at you with ill will, I'll gouge their eyes out. Arke patted her head. Anyone who dares criticize you, I'll pull their tongue out. Kaiden kissed the back of her hand. Anyone who dares reach out to you, I'll cut off their limbs. Luca chuckled darkly. Andrew joined in the fun. Uncle will rip off their heads. You just say the words. We'll protect you no matter what happens, the twins chimed. Us too. Oscar pointed to himself and Sophia. What was she supposed to say? Freya beamed. Thank you. I'll also rip off people's heads, pull out their tongues, gouge their eyes out and cut their limbs if anyone dares bully any of you. The demons who heard this felt their hearts tense. Is there anyone who dares bully those crazy bastards? They all chatted as they waited for the meat to cook through. The sizzling meat made Freya's mouth water. Arke picked up a piece of meat with his chopsticks and placed it in her bowl. She blew on the meat before putting it in her mouth. The tender juices of the grilled meat exploded on her tongue. It wasn't too fat, making the texture just right. Barbecued meat was the best. Looking at her reaction, Kaiden placed all the meat in his bowl into hers. He could wait. His precious treasure must eat first. Freya was about to take the second piece of meat into her mouth before a voice rang out. Everyone turned their head to the female with a teenager beside her. Her voice was bright. "Your Majesty, this lowly one has an important thing to tell you." Freya glanced at the teenager beside her. Why was he here?